Hey,
Hey, how's it going?
good. How are you? Well,
Same.
nothing's happened in the past 45 minutes.
Nope. Um, is everything going smoothly?
Yeah, so far, yes. Just waiting for the UK and Bonnian to enter.
Okay.
But so far, so good. Hopefully, nothing goes wrong. But by the way, do you hear a lot of background noise in my words? Okay, good. It was quite loud outside.
I mean, it sounded a little bit like someone just screamed, but I don't think it was like very loud.
Yeah. Welcome to London.
Yeah, exactly. Could have been someone screaming. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. It's always on the day where you feel like you should be rushing and doing something, but you're just sitting and waiting. So,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's a good thing, right? Like you wouldn't want to be rushing at this moment.
true. Yeah.
This is the first one that's been held in a couple of months, eh?
Yeah. It is. February wasn't going to happen because it was with the Russia. UAE got cancelled, but I think that's because of the situation in Ukraine. So this is first one since January.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've had a lot of quite a few cancellations, not happenings, postponement. So it's a relief we got here.
Yeah. Is there any move to start doing these things in person again, or is it going to stay online, do you think?
Not currently, no. I think that's just because, if I'm not wrong, things are only slowly starting to return in person. But we've also found that hosting these online have actually proven very useful, just in terms of engagement, because those who aren't based in New York are able to attend to. So yeah.
Yeah.
We are live streaming. I don't think this part will. I mean, it should only begin in 10 minutes.
Yeah, great point. Okay. It hasn't gone live yet on UN Web TV, so.
Yeah. Do you hear that? Yeah. Sorry.
It is what it is. Can't really control the sirens in London.
I'm on the 8th floor, though. That's the thing. I'm not even on the ground floor. So.
And it still carries up, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. People can hear a conversation. Okay, I'm gonna let the ambassador in now.
Okay, I'll disappear.
Good morning. Hi. Good morning. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. And we can hear you and see you just fine.
Great. Okay, we'll switch off and then we'll get the ambassador. Thank you.
Hi, Katie.
Hi. All good?
Yep.
I will have to keep my sound off because there's a lot of background noise where I am.
Yeah, your sound is a bit choppy. I don't know why.
My sound.
Yes.
We'll look into that.
Hi, Bonian. Just thought I'd say hey before we kick off.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
You look happy.
Yes, that's why I like to keep that picture up.
I'm gonna give it another minute or so before I start admitting everyone.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm gonna begin admitting people now.
Is Ambassador Woodward online? I see her name there.
Inform you of the date of the next meeting in consideration of
Yes, hello. Why I was unmuted?
Welcome everyone. We're just going to give it another minute for people to be able to log on. So please be patient. All right, people are slowly trickling in, but I think we will start because we have limited time. And I see Ambassador Woodward is here as well. Well, friends and colleagues, welcome to WIFUNA's monthly CSO briefing by the President of the Security Council. My name is Bonyankol Mohammadi. I work with the World Federation of UN Associations, and we work to strengthen the UN through grassroots activism of our more than 100 national UN associations around the world. And as part of our UN Security Council Transparency Initiative, we've been hosting these monthly dialogue meetings for civil society representatives with the President of the Council for, we're in our 7th year now. And they are opportunities to hear from the President of the Security Council about their work plan and the aims of their presidency, an opportunity to ask for clarifications, to raise matters to their attention, and to offer polite scrutiny of the Council's work. And the involvement of civil society, we believe, is indispensable to build durable peace. Through dialogues like this one today, we think that we can strengthen the links between the Council and civil society around the world. We're very honored today to be joined this month by Her Excellency Dame Barbara Woodward. United Kingdom has, among other things, singled out Ukraine, conflict-related sexual violence, vaccine equity, particularly in conflict zones, as particular priorities for the presidency of the Security Council. And we look forward to hearing more from the ambassador on that and other issues. Before giving her the floor, a few housekeeping reminders for those who haven't been with us before. Interactions. When the Q&A section starts, should focus obviously on the work of the Security Council. Please keep your mic on mute when you're not speaking. And this event is also being streamed live on UN Web TV. And we also live tweet as usual using hashtag #MeetUNSCPres. For those watching online, you can tweet your questions using that hashtag. If there is time, after all the pre-submitted questions have been asked, and if time allows, we will take questions from the floor or submitted via Twitter. And please also make sure that your name is displayed correctly to help us find you when it's your turn to ask a question. So with that, I would like to both thank again Ambassador Woodward. A warm welcome to you. Thank you for participating in this. And we look forward to hearing from you about the work plan of the Security Council and the United Kingdom's priorities. Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Well, Bonyan, good morning, and colleagues, good morning. I was just reflecting with colleagues how quickly this has come around, and I vividly remember our very useful exchange over a year ago now when I did my first chairing of the Security Council in February 2021. But in many ways, the world has moved on quite dramatically, and I'll pick out 3 things that we want to talk about before we move on to hearing your questions and your concerns. But can I say at the start, thank you very much indeed for the tradition you've established. We really value the role that civil society plays in the work of the United Nations, and including in the Security Council. And that's partly why we have prioritized bringing civil society voices to our meetings this month. So I'm very grateful to the opportunity to meet you all today. But also I want to say, in a wider context, we remain very committed to civil society participation at the UN in the context of the Secretary General's inclusive multilateralism. And we were also delighted to be elected to the NGO committee, which will be from 2023 to 26. So we'll be back on the NGO committee and look forward to championing civil society from there. Now, before I come on to take your questions, perhaps I can highlight 3 issues, which are very much the ones you trailed, Bonyan, on Ukraine, COVID-19 vaccines and conflict-related sexual violence. It won't come as a surprise to anyone that Ukraine has been absolutely top of our agenda. Our priorities have been to uphold the UN Charter, which has, of course, been trampled on by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to expose Russian lies, to be very frank, and to support the Ukrainian people while also addressing the threats to wider global instability, including on energy security, food, commodity, and finance costs. And we did this from the first substantive meeting of our presidency on the 5th of April, where the Council heard both from the Secretary General and also President Zelensky following the exposure of the horrific events in Bucha. And then on the 11th of April, we had Katerina Cherepaka, a Ukrainian civil society representative, join us to describe the devastating impact of Russia's invasion of Ukraine on women and girls. And yesterday, I chaired a council session where we discussed the humanitarian and refugee situation. So that's where we've got to on Ukraine, and there will be more ARIA-style meetings in the coming days. The second theme I wanted to pick up, Bonian, you also alluded to, which was COVID-19 vaccines. And we had our Minister for the United Nations, Lord Ahmad of Wimbledon, who came to chair meetings last week, looking again at the barriers to the equitable delivery of COVID-19 vaccines to vulnerable communities affected by conflict. And your colleagues and members will remember, of course, that this was the subject of our presidency resolution last February in 2021. So we really wanted to return to this to make sure we hadn't lost momentum. We know that less than 4% of the populations, for example, of DRC and Yemen in conflict areas are vaccinated. And so these communities really risk being left behind in global vaccination efforts, despite a much improved supply of vaccines. And we were very pleased to be joined by Dr. Emmanuel Odwang of CARE South Sudan, who offered us a very valuable perspective from the ground on COVID vaccination. And then moving on to the third theme, which you also mentioned, Bonian, which is conflict-related sexual violence. We wanted to focus on strengthening accountability and addressing impunity as a means for delivering justice for survivors and also trying to prevent future violence. And our debate was very much enriched by hearing from 3 civil society briefers, Helena Berhanu from Ethiopia, Nobel laureate Nadia Murad, and Syrian activist Mariana Karkutli. And I think that underlined the tragic prevalence of conflict-related sexual violence. It's not confined to any one conflict, although, of course, tragically, we have seen it in Ukraine as well. And that meeting was the launch pad too for a new global code of conduct, the Murad Code, named for Nadia Murad herself, developed by her along with other survivors to better support the survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. So our hope is that this will become the gold standard for any NGO, government or charity working on documenting and investigating conflict-related sexual violence. And I'm very pleased that the British Metropolitan Police, who are collecting evidence in Ukraine, have already adopted it for their work, because really we cannot prevent further violence unless there is a prospect of holding the perpetrators to account properly. Those were the 3 subjects I wanted to cover, but I just wanted to say a final word, Bonian, on working practices and to underline, and I hope reassure you, that we want to prevent intimidation and reprisals. So we have committed to the OHCHR good practice guidelines, which actually, of course, UK funding helped to develop. We are very conscious of the risks that some civil society representatives take in addressing the council. And it's essential, therefore, that we support them to brief in a safe way. And I write to them personally about that. We've also signed up to the WPS commitments. So a set of actions, as your members will know, shared by other council members to advance the WPS agenda in concrete and tangible ways during our presidency. And beyond inviting women to brief the Council, and the majority of our civil society briefers have been women, our signature event, the CRSV Open Debate, focused on the protection pillar of the WPS agenda. So, Bunyan, I know there are a lot of questions and comments, so I'll stop my introductory remarks there and hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for this quick overview of the program of work and your priorities. You're very right. There are many questions, so we will move quickly into the Q&A section, and we'll start with some situation-specific questions as usual, and then move over to some thematic ones. And please state your name and affiliation, and be concise with your questions to allow others to ask questions as well. We have a long list of people who would like to ask questions, so please be as brief as possible, and we will start on some questions, obviously, on the situation in Ukraine. First, we have John Dalton. John.
Greetings, Your Excellency. John Dalton with UNA USA on the National Council. And my question is, do you believe that the crisis in Ukraine has exposed failures in the way the UN Security Council is structured? And in reality, do you believe that we'll ever see those failures be overcome? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a couple of questions more on this. Next is Lori Perkovich.
Thank you, Excellency, for participating in this meeting today. Child Fund is responding to the crisis in Ukraine and also in Moldova. We're extremely concerned about the ongoing grave violations that are being committed against children. What will the Security Council do to address these violations and to protect children and their families? Thank you.
Thank you. And next question is Robert Hilty.
Thank you very much, Excellency. My question was, how do you see the impact of civil society, especially the national UNAs, in your work, and what is the impact of national UNAs during situations of crisis as what we have now today? Thank you very much.
Ambassador, please.
Well, thank you all for those questions. Picking them up in order, I think, yes, John, in answer to your first question, I don't think any of us thinks that the UN Security Council has responded in the way that we had hoped. In the founding charter, of course, we are there to prevent and protect future generations from the scourge of war. And in the situation in Ukraine, we have not been able to do that. Now, how does that reflect failures of structure? I think the big elephant in the room on this question, of course, is the veto, the power of the veto. And in particular, in this case, the way in which Russia has been able to use its veto to prevent action on Ukraine. I think there's been two interesting developments here. The first in which is the way in which the debate has shifted to the General Assembly. And we've seen three, I think, very important votes in the General Assembly. First, condemning the war itself. Second, of course, on the humanitarian situation. And thirdly, then, the one which forced Russia's to be kicked out of the Human Rights Council. So I would argue that there are structural failures, but we have, up to a point, managed to work around them, although not to the point of being able to prevent this war or any other. And before we berate ourselves too much about the particular problem with the veto, I think it's worth remembering, if we look back to November 2020 and the Ethiopian attacks in Tigray, we were hamstrung in the same way, and it was not because a member of the Security Council was exercising their veto. So there are structural limitations on what the United Nations can do. On the other hand, I think it's worth remembering that there are remarkable things that the United Nations can do. So, for example, the humanitarian effort has been getting aid right into the east of Ukraine, admittedly not as much as is needed. People are still holed up without food and water and warmth in many cities. But the UN has been pioneering the delivery of the humanitarian aid. Obviously, the World Food Programme, the refugee agencies have been working very closely, particularly along the borders. And we were hearing yesterday of the value of the Blue Dot work, which is particularly designed to help women and children if they are facing the threat of trafficking. They know that they're safe if they're in a Blue Dot program. So we are trying to do all we can, first of all, to stop the war, to see Putin's forces removed from Ukraine, but also to make sure the UN can work around some of the structural limitations and try and support the people of Ukraine and deal with the wider crisis that we now see rippling out into the world in economic and social and commodity terms as well. So there's plenty on the agenda that we are working on. Laurie, moving on to your question, and thank you for raising in particular the plight of children. We were talking about this only yesterday in refugee terms, of course, because 90% of the refugees are women and children. And so it's incredibly important to protect them and their families. And when I say refugees, I'm including also internally displaced persons. And I think there is some good news there. And I was talking only this morning to countries where they are already getting Ukrainian children into school to make sure that they have some stability and they're able to continue their education despite this period of appalling disruption and trauma in their childhoods. But there are some very worrying stories coming out too. And yesterday in the Security Council, we heard that of the 500,000 Ukrainians who are reported to have been forcibly moved to Russia, that includes over 100,000 children. Their plight is, of course, of deep concern to us. I called in the Security Council for them to be allowed to leave in safety and with dignity as soon as possible. So the plight of children remains right at the top of our agenda, and working closely with relevant UN agencies, including UNICEF, of course. And then the broader question about the impact of civil society on our work. I think I could answer you at great length on this one, but as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we've really valued having civil society briefers provide an important perspective to the Security Council, giving us, as it were, a ground truth from your direct experience wherever the civil society or whatever the situation is that we're discussing. But I think important too that we can work with civil society as delivery partners, and we can work with civil society also to counter Russian disinformation and lies. And more generally, in all of the situations that we see, we can hear the truth and the data and the statistics that you have. So we very much appreciate our partnership with civil society. We will continue to champion inclusive multilateralism, and we are, as I said earlier, delighted to be back on the NGO committee from the year after next. So shall I stop there on those three questions, Bonian, and take another group?
Thank you, Ambassador. Next, we have Lou Charbonneau.
Thank you, Bonian, and thank you, Ambassador Woodward. I wanted to pick up on two issues that you'd mentioned, and also first, by way of introduction, to thank you for getting on the NGO committee. And this is something that we've been in discussion with your mission now for several years. And we appreciate every, ray of light that comes into that committee, which shouldn't be called the NGO committee at this point. It's more of an anti-NGO committee. But the balance of pro civil society has improved a bit, so that maybe now we have a bit of a fighting chance there. We'll see how it pans out next year, but thank you for that. My questions, and again, Lou Charbonneau, Human Rights Watch, on Ethiopia, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International released a joint report recently about what we determined are crimes against humanity in Western Tigray. We've been very concerned about the lack of attention on the Security Council to Ethiopia in terms of public meetings, and it's been difficult mobilizing African countries. So I'm wondering what you think is possible on the Security Council. And also in terms of, you mentioned Ukraine, there will be an ARIA meeting on accountability in Ukraine next week. What more can be done to promote accountability in New York, given the deadlock on the Security Council? We have a commission of inquiry that's been mandated by the Human Rights Council. The General Assembly has been mobilized. What more can we in civil society do also to promote Ukrainian civil society? Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Just a reminder to everyone, please mute your microphone when you're not, when you haven't been given the floor. Next, we have Marie-Christine Krejci.
Thank you, Bonian. Thank you, Ambassador Woodward, for outlining the UK's commitments and priorities in the Council and for meeting with civil society actors today. My name is Marie-Christine Krejci from Crisis Action. I just wanted to ask a question regarding recent events in Mali, specifically the massacre we witnessed in Mora, and that MINUSMA-led investigations have been stalled, and these forces are unable to enter the area and carry out this investigation. So we wanted to hear if you had an update on the situation and if the Security Council is taking steps to unblock the process. Alternatively, if there's any other mechanisms in the UN system at our disposal to pursue accountability for the crimes. Thank you.
Thank you. And next question, I believe, is on Yemen. Shaima Bahashwain. Shaima, are you with us? If not, we will try to find you. Shaima?
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is Shaima Bahashwain from ISO organization. Thank you so much for giving me this chance to talk to the Miss President Wood for the Security Council today. We are thanking the good effort of the Security Council that happened for the peace process in Yemen. My question is, what are the priorities of the Yemeni file of the Council, and are there any forthcoming resolution in Yemen, as it had happened with Mr. Hans Grandberg, the envoy to the Yemen, and he talked about the Thai society and how the roads are still closing until now. Is there any solution for the looking to open this road, and what are the Security Council resolution for the consultation of Riyadh and Muscat City that had happened a week ago? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador.
Well, thank you, Bunyan. Quite a wide-ranging set of questions there. So going back to Lou, Human Rights Watch, good to see you again. On Ethiopia, thank you very much indeed for your joint report with Amnesty International. And I do take your point that there are so many pressing files, and Ethiopia has been one of those which we have sought to keep alive despite the focus on Ukraine. And we had a discussion on the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia last week. So I think encouraged by the fact that humanitarian access to Tigray and northern Ethiopia does now seem to be improving. We had Martin Griffiths brief us as the trucks were moving in, but we also asked him not just about the trucks, but about the distribution mechanisms, because there's no point getting all the food to one point without distributing it. So we very much want to see that sustained. We also completely recognise the need to investigate and bring to justice the reports around the atrocities, the war crimes that we have seen evidence of during the conflict. So I think in some ways I would say, please be assured that this does remain very much on the agenda for us, but it would be helpful for us, drawing on your recent report, to sort of think about how the international community can sustain and increase access, particularly now with the drought in southern Ethiopia. So we're facing, as it were, a twin issue of famine and need for humanitarian aid, but also how we can support the conflict sensitive and all of the peace building measures that need to take place across the various regions of Ethiopia. And then also how we can work in partnership to scale up the delivery of humanitarian aid. So reassuring, but let's stay in close touch on the question of Ethiopia. And then coming on to your question on accountability on Ukraine, I think this is a very important question indeed. And we have, the UK was one of the first countries to support the ICC investigation. And I think now just shy of 40 countries have joined the call for the International Criminal Court. Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, has started his investigation, and indeed, I think said last week, Ukraine, the whole country is now a scene of crime investigation. So we're taking that very seriously. As you say, we've got the HRC Commission of Inquiry. We've also established here in New York, alongside the various official measures, Friends of Accountability for Ukraine. And that's being led by the Danish permanent representative. So that's, I think, an important way of keeping the debate here in New York. But we shall, I think, I hope be working very closely with all of you on these questions of accountability for war crimes that we are seeing. Moving on to Marie-Christine and the question of Mali. Thank you for raising that massacre. It was of great concern to us. And as you know, we have a contingent of troops based in Gao. We had a briefing on Mali on the 7th of April at the beginning of our presidency, which of course was about 3 months after the renewal of the MINUSMA mandate. 3 months before the renewal of the MINUSMA mandate. And I think the priority remains faster progress for Mali's political transition, but also, we are very concerned about the deteriorating security situation in Mali, including, to be honest, the decision by the Mali authorities to employ the Wagner Group as part of the security operation. On a more positive note, we were very pleased to have Bintou Samake, the president of Women in Law and Development in Africa, and she gave us, I think, a very useful perspective about the challenges facing peace builders on the ground in Mali, and she was able to brief us alongside the special representative Wayne. So I think a useful discussion there, but we do remain very seized of the risks going on in Mali. And then finally, Shaima, coming to your question about Yemen. We were talking about Yemen in the Council, as I'm sure you'll know, just last week on the 14th of April. We did meet in closed consultations, which I think allowed us to have a particularly useful and frank exchange. As you know, Hans Grundberg was able to brief us, and we covered a discussion of the humanitarian crisis, the political process, and the number of cross-border attacks that we have seen. We all very much hope that the current truce will be able to translate into a ceasefire, and then beyond that into a political process. I should reassure you that Hans Grundberg did particularly raise the question of roads access, but I would say that he stressed that this truce is still in its very early days. We're all hopeful, as I said, that it will be able to lead to a ceasefire and a political process, but also that we can't load it too early on with too many expectations. So the roads and the access are definitely important alongside humanitarian aid and alongside seeing an end to the attacks. But I haven't got a definite answer for you on that, except to reassure you that it remains on our agenda, as does the plight of all the Yemeni people. So we will continue to monitor, but also I think I want to reassure you, be ready to step in as the council if there are disruptions to this peace process, which for the first time in 7 years brings hope to the people of Yemen. So thank you for your question on that. And back to you, Bonyan.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. We now have 3 questions on Myanmar. And the first person is Alana Shalgren.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Ambassador. My question is this: the ASEAN 5-point consensus will be 1 year old in 4 days' time. So I'm interested to know, how does the UK propose to use its leadership both inside and out of the council to support and push forward implementation of the consensus, and ultimately foster resolution of the dire human rights, humanitarian, which also includes a deepening child protection catastrophe, and as well as the economic and political crises? I should have mentioned I'm Alana with Save the Children. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. Next is Tenzar U.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. We are very interested to know what would UK during its presidency would do as a permanent UN Security Council member to tell two other, especially the UN permanent Security Council members, to stop, selling arms and providing equipment to Myanmar military, which are obviously used in genocide and crimes against humanity in Myanmar. And we also herewith, on behalf of our country, stand with Ukraine and many other countries around the world who are suffering from dictatorship and military-made crisis. But we'll really appreciate how you could help and how we as civil societies can support. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Adam Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Ambassador Woodward. Through its program Burma Task Force, the NGO I work with, Justice for All, has partnered with Rohingya leaders for 10 years now. We, of course, welcome continued discussion of Myanmar in the Council, but see little sign of hope for the vast number of Rohingya and other ethnic minorities displaced by the cruel Burmese military, nor do we see any sign that the current junta will allow meaningful repatriation with restoration of rights and homes. Therefore, we address a question to the UK as penholder in this matter. Considering the obvious limits to consensus building in the Council, together with the atrocities taking place both in Myanmar and in Ukraine, it seems to us time to acknowledge that the 3 Security Council members keeping the nation of Myanmar in a state of extreme crisis are Russia, China, and India. We note that the day after the General Assembly voted to stop arms transfers to Myanmar, Russian and Burmese generals were meeting for exactly that purpose. All 3 countries sell arms to the generals. So my question, which UN policies have been affected? We don't put a lot of expectation on ASEAN or on the 5-point consensus, but we'd like to see actual action. Isn't it time to bring a resolution to a vote, at least to show the world where everyone stands And if not, what action can be taken?
Thank you for those questions, Madam Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you for your continued focus on Myanmar, which I know you'll remember as well as I do. Of course, the coup took place in the first days of our Security Council presidency last year, and we were able to bring the council together for a series of statements expressing concern. But I readily acknowledge that tragically the situation has got worse, not better since then. We're seeing more violence, and I think the chances of peace receding. So Alana, to your point, it is tragic that it's now a year since the 5-point consensus was adopted, and we're seeing more violence rather than less, as I mentioned. Thank you for all you're doing for child protection. I think it's really important through the work of Save the Children. We are having a private meeting of the Security Council at the end of our presidency, probably the 28th of April, and we'll continue to underline the importance of implementing the 5-point consensus. And we are hoping to hear not just from the new UN Special Envoy Noel Herzer, but also from the ASEAN Special Envoy. So hear up-to-date reports of their most recent visits. But I underline again how valuable your work is, particularly where you are on the ground and able to bring us reports from outside the capital and from a wide range of interlocutors. I will add that I had the opportunity to meet the NUG Foreign Minister and Human Rights Minister last week as well, and they were very clear in their commitment, not just very generously to what is going on in Ukraine, but also to human rights and a very clear foreign policy for Myanmar. But of course, they are not currently in power in Myanmar. And then the question of arms sales, I agree, remains a great concern. It's well known, I think, that many of Myanmar's arms now come from Russia, and that's they're being bought, and then how they get the money to do that is also an important issue. So it's definitely on our agenda as an issue of concern, although we haven't been able to stop it. But thank you for the work that you're doing to draw attention to it. And then Adam, coming on to the question of Rohingya, we do remain very aware of the awful circumstances in which the Rohingya were forced to flee from Myanmar, the difficulties they now face in Bangladesh, but also the work that Bangladesh is doing, of course, to try and look after them, and also the challenge of ensuring that they're able to return in safety and with dignity to Myanmar. And again, this was something that the NUG Human Rights Minister raised with me, that they were very aware indeed of the importance of respecting minority rights in a way that perhaps had not been the case, which was not the case before when the Rohingyas were expelled from Myanmar. So something that remains very much on our agenda. I think to pick up your challenge, Adam, it is important for us to continue to work with the ASEAN. I know that it can sometimes seem slow, but I think the 5-point consensus is important. They have done some, for ASEAN, some quite important work in terms of excluding Myanmar from some of their meetings, and they do continue to engage, and they are the neighbouring countries. But I think the optimum is that we work as the UN in close partnership with them in order to try and keep things moving forward and bring a solution to the coup, which is now well over a year old. Thank you for those questions.
Thank you. Now we have a question on Sudan. Hisham Ahmed. Hisham.
Hi, Excellency. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Yes, our people in Sudan at the moment that still there is a crime against the humanity from the military coup, and I would like to know exactly the human rights council or the United Nations, what they're going to do exactly to stop this kind of crime.
Thank you, Hisham. The sound was a little bit distorted. I hope the ambassador got the question. Otherwise, maybe Katie can help getting that question separately. And then we have two questions on the situation in Israel and Palestine. First is Ahmed Abuful. Ahmed.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ambassador, for your time. I'm particularly happy that you mentioned that the UK will focus on three areas: conflict areas and civil society participation, and the importance of accountability. And I will ask a brief question on each, if I'll be allowed. First, in the occupied and legally annexed East Jerusalem, Israel forces have been raiding Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest places for Muslims in the world, and assaulting worshippers inside it during the holiest month in the Muslim calendar. Israel, as the occupying power, has violated over 40 Security Council resolutions. Why is the UK and the Security Council at this point so far failing to condemn such attacks and naming Israel as the aggressor? As for civil society organization, it's very good to hear that the UK supports civil society, and perhaps it's only appropriate here to mention that 6 months ago, Israel's apartheid regime designated 6 Palestinian civil society and human rights organizations as terrorist organizations, including ours, Al-Haq, without providing a shred of evidence. While many UN experts condemned the designations, the UK still hasn't done so and continued to wait endlessly for information that Israel refuses to provide. So the question is why the UK and the Security Council keeping silent on and failing to condemn Israel's designations on Palestinian civil society while passionately advocating for other civil societies around the world. And my final question regarding accountability. While we're seeing and witnessing a mounting recognition and consensus among the human rights movement, including UN special rapporteurs, that Israel is committing the crime against humanity of apartheid against the Palestinian people, the UK only last month abstained on a resolution at the United Nations Human Rights Council on the obligation to ensure accountability and justice in the occupied Palestinian territory. So the question, the obvious question is, why is the UK being so reluctant to support accountability and justice in Palestine while speaking passionately and supporting it in other parts of the world? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Kubra Kalkandalan.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. My name is Kubra Kalkandalan. I'm asking this question on behalf of International Communities Organization. Our stakeholders from both Arab-Palestinian neighborhoods and the Israeli Jewish neighborhoods in East Jerusalem have voiced their concerns about the return to the violence, which was witnessed last year during Ramadan and religious holidays. We understand that the UK shares similar concerns about the escalating tensions in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and encourages all parties to take steps to avoid tensions and conflict. International Communities Organization would like to ask what concrete steps the UK takes for joint activities led by both parties, particularly for the Joint Economic Committee, especially during our presidency. During its presidency of the UN Security Council, will the UK lead the establishment of such joint initiatives that can potentially progress reconciliation and peace building in the region? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador.
Thank you very much for those three questions. The question on Sudan wasn't terribly clear, but let me try for an answer anyway, which is just to let you know that we'll have a discussion on the situation in Abia on the 21st of April. So that is tomorrow. And that will, of course, be ahead of the renewal of the mandate, which is due on the 15th of May. And for that discussion, we're going to be hearing from the SRSG, Hannah Tete, in her new role as the SRSG for the Horn of Africa. And more generally, I want to reassure you that we are encouraging all the Sudanese parties to engage with the UN facilitated talks, the UN, AU and IGAD talks to resolve the current crisis. And we will continue to urge during our presidency for Security Council attention on this. And then we'll hope, as I say, that there'll be mandate renewal for the political mission in the next couple of months. So I hope that answers most of the question. I'm sorry it wasn't so clear. The sound wasn't so clear. Quite a lot of questions on Israel-Palestine questions. In following, we had all hoped that our calls for there to be peaceful observation of the many holy holidays which were taking place over the past few weeks. Sadly, that was not the case. And so we had consultations in the Security Council yesterday on this, and we'll have scheduled consultations on the 25th of April. That will be the Middle East quarterly open debate. That will, of course, give us a chance again to focus on developments on the ground, and in particular, the tensions that both Ahmed and Kubra alluded to in their questions. We were, of course, very distressed by the spate of terror attacks in March, and I want to reassure you that the Council will continue to take a strong stand against terror and in favour of peace. And we recognise, of course, the many different views around this, but we will hold a consistent position. I mean, Ahmed, many of your questions referred more generally to UK policy rather than our tenure as President of the Security Council. So I suggest that we find another way to pick those up. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will have some thematic questions. We'll take all four in this round, and I'll just remind everyone, please be brief with your questions. We have, as you can see, lots of raised hands as well. The first one is Anne Pacoa. Anne, the floor is yours. Maybe Anne can join us later. Then we have Helen Kezi in Woha.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Sorry, my internet is not very good, so I can use the picture so that my network can be there. Ambassador, thank you for this meeting and the opportunity for NGOs to engage with you.
Really sorry, I'm not getting sound. Oh, come on. Yeah, come.
Sorry?
The sound is a bit choppy, Helen, but try again. Otherwise, I will try to read your question. Go ahead, Helen. Helen, are you with us? So Helen, we cannot hear you, but the question that I had from you was this for the ambassador: what is the Security Council doing to ensure the safety of women in war-torn countries such as Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, Mali, Nigeria, Sudan? That's the question I had. We will now go over to Cynthia Brain. Cynthia.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you, Ambassador Woodward, for your comments on conflict-related sexual violence. My name is Cynthia Brain, and I am currently working for the Global Partnerships for the Prevention of Armed Conflict based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. On behalf of GPAC, we would like to know, what prevention topic do you consider championing in the UN Security Council moving forward? And how can country-level discussions help to advance?
Thank you. I think the second portion was how can country-level discussions advance prevention, if I'm correct. And last in this round of thematic questions is Gay Rosenblum. Gay.
Thank you. And along the same lines about conflict prevention, I'm Gay Rosenblum Kumar with Peace Direct. Ambassador, we have observed and appreciated the UK's strong leadership in the Council on conflict prevention issues. My organization is particularly grateful for your work as pen holder and keeping issues like Sudan and Myanmar so ever present. Yet this comes amidst a backdrop of reports that the UK government may deprioritize conflict prevention in their international development approach. If this change in national policy takes place, do you see this as changing the UK's priorities in the Security Council? And how would this change manifest in your mission's approach and current activities on conflict prevention issues? Thank you.
Thank you. Gay, Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for such thoughtful questions on women in particular and the gender equality agenda. Helen, you had a long list of conflicts there, which reminds us just how dramatic the impact of war on women is. So we've already talked a bit about the conflict-related sexual violence initiative. So just a couple of words of reminder there. We were able last week to use our signature event on conflict-related sexual violence as a springboard to launch the MURAD Code, which will help investigation into conflict-related sexual violence. So that will be highly important for us. And again, our partnerships with NGOs working in the field are incredibly important to what we are able to do to protect women and try and prevent sexual violence. And the UK will be hosting an international conference on conflict-related sexual violence towards the end of this year in November. That, of course, will be 10 years on from the then Foreign Minister William Hague work with Angelina Jolie to really give a boost to the preventing sexual violence in conflict agenda. So we remain very seized of this, and it remains a personal priority for the UK Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. But for all the conflicts that you mentioned, Helene, women are in a terrible position in all of them. In Afghanistan, we're very aware of the impact of the recent Taliban decisions, particularly on girls' education. And Lord Ahmed, when he was here just last week, was talking to me about the value he places on being in touch with Afghan women leaders who are currently in the UK and taking advice from them in order to shape policy. And that is replicated in so many other conflicts too. Cynthia, in terms of conflict-related sexual violence, I think the country discussions are incredibly important. Every woman's life is different, and every woman's experience of conflict-related sexual violence will impact her differently. And so it's very important that we not treat this as just a holistic issue, but are also able to understand those stories and to try and bring justice to the women who've been affected and do what we can to prevent conflict-related sexual violence. So thank you for your continuing interest there. Gay, in terms of conflict prevention, I'm concerned about the stories because the UK is, of course, a big champion of peace-building commission, but also conflict prevention. Frankly, first of all, the maths make that sensible. Conflict is incredibly expensive. Preventing it is a very important way to ensure that we don't spend money and waste lives in the course of that. We used our SOFA talks. Many of you will be familiar with the concept of SOFA talks, an opportunity for the permanent representatives of the Security Council to get together away from the Security Council in an informal setting and hear briefings from experts and then have an informal discussion. And our focus of those talks, which took place just 10 days ago, was actually looking at conflict prevention and in particular the roles of data and technology. And I have to say, I thought it was one of the most lively discussions that we've had. And we were able to, I think, agree that we all needed to come back to this subject and had a lot to bring to the table. So So let me reassure you, Gay, that we remain very seized indeed of conflict prevention and using, as we explored then, the data to as early warning for when conflict is coming, but also benefiting from technology there. So I'll stop on those three questions there. Back to you, Bohan.
Thank you. Now we will move over to some from the floor who've asked to ask some questions. I'm trying to also see if Anne Pacoa, who wanted the floor earlier, I can see that she is here, but Anne, are you here with us? Anne Pacoa? If you still cannot connect, then the next person is Kristen Broker.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Kristen Broker with the Jacob Blaustein Institute for the Advancement of Human Rights. Thank you very much, Ambassador. My question is about Ukraine. And we've been very impressed over the course of the conflict with the information that's been gathered and provided by the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine, established by OHCHR, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, after the invasion of Crimea back in 2014. And we know that it's funded in part by the UK and other supportive states. The daily report of civilian casualties that the monitoring mission has been publishing has been critical from our perspective because it's helped to push back against the narrative that Russia is promoting in the Security Council and in the General Assembly that's clearly false about the conduct of its forces. Yet we've been troubled that we're still hearing member states insisting, for example, in the context of the debate on suspension of Russia from the Human Rights Council, that the facts aren't known, that Russia's culpability for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and other violations of human rights is not been established. And my question is the UK exploring ways to shine more of a spotlight in New York on the important role that the HRMMU is playing in Ukraine and to ensure that it has the resources that it needs to weigh in on exactly what's happening in the course of this conflict? Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca Johnson. Rebecca, you're muted.
Sorry, just was trying to sort out. So my question is the reminder that there are 4 NPT nuclear-armed states surrounding Ukraine with around 11,000 nuclear weapons. And we've already seen Putin, President Putin of Russia, threatening and brandishing nuclear weapons early on in the war when it didn't go his way. And there are 2 treaties this year with important meetings coming up. One is the first meeting of states parties of the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, the TPNW, which 2/3 of UN General Assembly members negotiated and adopted in 2017. And the second, and that will take place in June, and the second is the postponed 2020 10th Review Conference of the NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty, will be held, COVID willing, in New York in August. So I really appreciate this effort by Ambassador Woodward to meet with civil society and for WFUNA to be hosting this. In fact, I think my first time in Geneva back in the 1990s was as a WFUNA representative on the Comprehensive Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear, the Comprehensive Treaty, Test Ban Treaty. Anyway, but my question really is, what more can be done both by the UK as an NPT depository, but not only that, but by the Security Council as a whole to support and encourage the universalization and implementation of the UN multilateral treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, and participation where Ukraine is undoubtedly going to be discussed in Vienna at the first meeting of states parties, participation in trying to reinforce that nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation regime. And what can Ambassador Woodward do to facilitate a much more constructive attitude towards the implementation of both of these two important treaties?
Thank you. Next, John Francis.
Thank you. Ambassador, I've been looking back over my shoulder. I have a long association with the United Nations Association in the United Kingdom. And I'm thinking in particular of a period when we discussed openly with the UN itself the whole question of larger freedom. And in particular, there were a number of initiatives at the time. And earlier in your reply to questions, you mentioned the existence of the Peace Building Commission. And it does seem that the time must be right to renew that initiative and to see a specific Peace Building Commission for Ukraine, which goes wider than just the present arrangements and the dialogue that's being conducted rather informally between Russia and the Ukraine itself. So I wonder whether you have any feelings or impressions that a new Peace Building Commission with a targeted effort on Ukraine might be feasible, and whether it might also include considerations of the post-conflict reconstruction that will definitely be needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Ambassador, please.
Thank you, Bonyan, and thank you for those three questions. Back to the questions of from Kristin on civilian casualties and investigations and information. So I think the first thing to do is, like you, to pay tribute to the OHCHR and the many other organizations who are doing their utmost to bring us accurate data. And I pay tribute too to the OSCE, who were also doing that for a long time before the war and have been doing much work since then. We share the view that what we saw coming out of Bucha was horror, and it was indeed, I think, a pivotal moment for the war, and one when the Security Council really did pause when we heard from President Zelensky. I think there is a really important role, as you say, for the UN in providing impartial information. And we've seen that on the questions of casualties, deaths, where I know the numbers are difficult and we all think that they are being undercounted. Also really important, the work they're doing on refugee numbers, but also the work that the support we've had from the disarmament part of the United Nations on rebutting the allegations from Russia about chemical and biological weapons use. So I do applaud the role that the UN is playing in making sure that we have accurate information on which to base our discussions. It does, as you were saying, Kristin, make it very difficult with the disinformation, propaganda and lies that are coming out. I think we all know that it's difficult to collect accurate information in a war, but this one, I would say that Russia is waging a particular war of disinformation and lies in Ukraine, and being able to counter that is very important. So we look forward to continuing to working with the UN, but also with all of you to make sure that there is accurate information and then accountability and support to follow it. Rebecca, you raised the question about the NPT RevCon and the prohibition of nuclear weapons. Going back to January, when we thought the NPT RevCon was going to take place, one of the landmark declarations was, of course, the Security Council Permanent 5 members, so us, the US, France and Russia and China, reaffirming our commitment to nuclear safety and abiding by the terms of the NPT. Now, as you said, since then, we have seen some very odd threats from President Putin early in the war. There really is, this war is bad enough, but without escalating it into a nuclear conflict, which is something that we all want to do all we can to avoid, and we will continue to do that. And as you say, we very much look forward to the NPT RevCon delayed, but now rescheduled for August, and the UK will be represented as usual, at a senior ministerial level for that. We're not party to the Prohibition on Nuclear Weapons Treaty, so I don't really have anything to add on that, but we are looking forward to the NPT RevCon in August. John, back to your question on larger freedom and peace building. We do a lot of work here in the UK mission on the Peace Building Commission and continue to remain very committed to strengthening it. We've been working with Kenya as PBC liaison and also with Bangladesh as the chair in order to provide advice and support for the meetings, both on things like COVID vaccines, but also on the Great Lakes coming up. You raised the particular question of Ukraine. It would be very nice, I think, for the Peace Building Commission to have a role. Sadly, as you may have heard, we don't think that there is much progress on the talks that are currently sort of underway, but no one wants to call an end to that while there is a possibility of a negotiated solution. And then, of course, as you say, post-conflict reconstruction will be incredibly important, and we will want to participate in that. Obviously, a lot of work going on at the spring meetings this week in Washington around financing for Ukraine in support of just getting through this phase, but we've obviously got our hopes pinned on something more sustainable in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Our time is shortly running out, so we can only have 2 more questions. Unfortunately, as always, there's a great deal of interest to ask the Ambassador lots of more questions, but 2 more questions. Next one is from Jean Tanaka. Jean, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you for giving the time and share the great opportunities to talk to these sessions. I'm also living in Japan, and I also have some questions regarding to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. There's some active military operations by Russia in Asia Pacific region, and also there are some countries in Asia such as the China and some other countries are not critical of the Russia's aggressions, making to some situations be some unstable. Moreover, the situation is not only has a strong impact to the future sea lanes, but could also have some strong impact to our allies and the Commonwealth as well. So I like to ask about how does the United Nations, include the United Kingdom, think about how can we protect some security situations for the supporting to the energy transitions and the sea lane trading for the Commonwealth countries? That's all my questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And the final question is by Ankit Bhuptani. Ankit.
Thank you so very much. And many congratulations, Excellency, for UK's election to the NGO committee. We in India are very happy to see you there because UK has been a great champion of human rights. I come from an organization called Queer Hindu Alliance, and we advocate for human rights and LGBT rights in specific. I have one question and one request, Madam. One, the question is, India has supported an independent investigation on the Ukraine crisis. How the UN Security Council or UN in general will implement that independent investigation so that the people who are responsible for war crimes are named and shamed and accountability is placed. And my second part of the question, and that is a request, would be an election of independent experts on SOGI rights or LGBT rights of the UNHRC is going to be due this year. And we look forward to the UK's continuous support for the LGBT rights in the UN mechanism. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you. And as I'm giving the floor back to you, Ambassador, once you answer these questions, if you also have any final remarks, the floor is yours. You're muted. Sorry.
Sorry, Bonyan. Jean, thank you very much for your question. Quite a wide-ranging one about the security of sea lanes for energy and the Commonwealth. But I think perhaps best addressed by saying, we are very aware of the importance of Asia-Pacific security as of, the trading lanes of any of the great seas around. The UK, in a bilateral capacity, of course, is very aware that this is very much an Asia-Pacific century, and we have been strengthening our relationships with key partners in the Asia-Pacific region. And that is, of course, a commercial strengthening, but also a security strengthening. So we have committed to supporting keeping sea lanes open for energy supplies. Obviously, energy is very much impacted by the Ukraine conflict, and in particular by the sanctions placed on Russia, which is one of the world's key energy suppliers. You'll have seen the impact of that on Europe, a bit less on the UK perhaps, but it's something that I think we need to watch, but also make sure that we don't all fall back into using coal and causing further damage to the very fragile climate and environment of our planet. So we very much hope that we'll be able to pivot away from dependence on Russian gas wherever we are in the world towards more renewable energy, but also keep the sea lanes open for trade. We don't need to see protectionism added to the number of economic problems that the world is facing at the moment. And then just finally on the Commonwealth, we are very much looking forward to handing over the baton of the Commonwealth to Rwanda to chair the Commonwealth Heads of State meeting in Kigali. Because of COVID, that's been postponed a few times, but we are looking forward to that and very much looking forward to Rwanda taking on that baton. And Keith, thank you very much for your questions from India. Absolutely, the UK is very committed, and as chair of the Security Council, we are very committed to ensure that war crimes in Ukraine are properly investigated and the perpetrators are brought to justice. We've touched on the role of the International Criminal Court, and the chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, is already collecting evidence in Ukraine from some of the atrocities that have been brought to light. There is, as we've said, the Human Rights Commission of Inquiry, and there is also a group of Friends of Accountability and many other discussions going on about what the most appropriate mechanism will be when to bring the perpetrators of this war, this Russian war in Ukraine, to justice. So we'll keep a very close watch on that. And then in terms of the elections, yes, the UK will remain very committed indeed to the full range of human rights, including LGBTQ rights. Thank you very much. And then just to say, Bonyan, this has been a very wide-ranging session, and I want to thank again your members for the work they do on the ground, for their partnership with the United Nations, because as I say, we view that as very much a virtuous circle. What you know, what you can do on the ground, I hope is enhanced by your partnership with us. And so with that, I wish you all success. Thank you for all you're doing, and look forward to seeing you at our next Security Council presidency meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you to all participants. Apologies to those who didn't have an opportunity to ask your questions. Hopefully you can find other fora for that, but an extra big thanks to Ambassador Woodward. We know this month is extremely challenging and busy for the Security Council. So for you to give this opportunity for civil society to interact with you has really been appreciated by all of us, I'm sure. And thank you, and good luck with the rest of your presidency as well. And thank you, everyone, and hope to see you again next month. Goodbye.
Bonia.